perceive. But that's basically the point.
Thank you for that wonderful definition. Yusuf, listeners, we are tuned to Radio Ansaar 90.4 FM. The program is Spread the Word, brought to you by the IPCI. This morning, my name is Shabir Bash. I have Yusuf Ismail with me in the studios. And we also have a guest from Malaysia. Her name is Victoria Edwards. We'll have a live link up in a few seconds. Before going to Malaysia on the live link up, our technician is trying to arrange that for us right now. Quickly, something about Victoria Edwards. Victoria Edwards is currently a student for film and television at Lim Kong Wing. Am I right, Yusuf?
Yeah, it's Lim Kong Wing University.
Lim Kong Wing, I got that right. University in Malaysia.
I believe it's a creative arts department, if I'm not mistaken, but we can obviously ascertain it.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
She is 23 years old and was born and raised in Canada until she was 15 years old when her family decided to move to Malaysia. And alhamdulillah, she's been a Muslim since Ramadan 2011. That's quite soon, Yusuf. That was just like a few months ago.
2 years ago, I think.
2 years. 2011.
2011, last year, of course.
Last year, of course, yes. So the sister is new in the faith. Listeners, our normal program with Brother Imtiaz Ahmad from Chennai will continue next week, as of course. So we gave Imtiaz Ahmad a break this morning, and we want to hear Victoria Edwards. And Yusuf and I will be chatting with her shortly. Is the sister on the line? Assalamu alaikum, Sister Victoria. Sister, assalamu alaikum. I think we
seem to have lost her, basically.
Yes.
We'll make contact. But I think just coming back to what I had suggested, Shabir, and we were talking about definitions, and we were talking about the whole issue of identity and what it means to be a Muslim in the 21st century. Mm-hmm. I would urge people to look and reflect at the works of Muhammad Asad, for example, and many of the classical scholars of the 20th century, mm-hmm. who clearly bring this definition to the fore, that it's important that we don't particularly constrain ourselves in any form of parochial, narrow outlook, but accept it in the broader sense. And we experienced that yesterday. Yesterday, when this was brought to the attention of the Hindu group that came to the IPCI, mm-hmm. For the very first time I experienced this, and I had even been speaking to the coordinator Iqbal at the IPCI about this. After having presented the perspective, and we had a joint session and a joint engagement, we had Hindu groups and mm-hmm. Hindu students basically going and engaging in Salah, which was quite unique. I never experienced something along that particular line. And that was a novel approach for me, and I think that was only possible. It's because of the fact that they saw Islam as a universal system, as a universal way of life, and certainly something which is not narrow and not parochial. Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, all of these are named after particular individuals. Christianity after Christ, Buddhism after Buddha, Hinduism after the land of the Indus Valley, the land of the Hind. But Islam, on the other hand, is not, because basically it's broader, it's denoting the quality of absolute submission, and through that you thereby acquire peace.
Thank you for that, Yusuf. Listeners, we do have contact with now Victoria Edwards from Malaysia. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Victoria.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
How are you doing, Sister?
Alhamdulillah, I'm great, thank you. I hope you both are well also.
Jazakallah shukran. Yusuf, want to say salams to you?
Assalamu alaikum, Victoria. It's good to speak to you.
Wa alaikum assalam. Good to speak to you also. You sound very well educated in Islam. I look forward to this.
Shukran jazilan to Yusuf. The comment there for you.
Thanks for that, Sister. I think we just basically do what we can do. And I just came across your clip. I'm on YouTube quite often, and I was quite fascinated by that interview, I think, that you did in a Malaysian mosque, probably, I think it was in June of this year, in 2012, where you were giving your perspectives and your views and your ideas, and I just found it quite fascinating, and I found your story quite inspiring as well, I might add.
Alhamdulillah, I'm so glad that it's reaching all over the world. SubhanAllah, it's amazing what the internet can do for Islam now.
Of course. Sister, we welcome you to the program called Spread the Word. It's brought by the Islamic Propagation Center, the IPCI in Durban, South Africa, an organization that was established by Sheikh Ahmed Deedat as early as 1958 and continues to run its Dawa programs at its head office in Queen Street in Durban. So we welcome you to this particular program. It's a weekly look at Dawa issues brought by the IPCI. And Brother Yusuf Ismail has suggested that we get you on air as well to share and get your thoughts and views about your migration process, etc., and get some advice from you as well, and also ask you a few questions as we go along.
Great, thanks. Glad to be here.
So, Sister, if I might just come up with this, which is, I was looking at a report by Kevin Bryce of Swansea University, and he was basically conducting a kind of a series of, should I say, research material from converts or reverts, if you can call them, about their views on the negative aspects in British culture. And the vast majority of them, most of them, interestingly enough, are young, white female reverts. They identified the issue of alcoholism. They identified the issue of the lack of morality and unrestrained consumerism. And in fact, one particular report, you had a lady saying that she was a slave to a broken society. Now, I've seen, basically based on our communications and what I've seen about you on YouTube and so on, I do believe you have left from Canada and subsequently moved to Malaysia. Give us briefly a bit about your background and what was rather the motivating factor or the spark that led to this impetus, which basically caused this entire transformation in your life?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a typical Canadian, I did do a lot of so-called haram things before, not knowing that they are actually something wrong. Of course, when you touch on alcoholism and alcohol in general, I mean, when you drink and when you go to the clubs and you have fun and you party, you do things that maybe aren't really in your character, but it doesn't click when you don't think that there's some actual punishment. I mean, maybe the next day will be punishment for you. You'll remember some things that you did and you'll feel horrible for the next day. But when you don't have this sense that actually after the next day, these consequences are actually continuing with you, whether you can feel them physically or not, through Allah and through the punishment that we get from doing these so-called haram things. So before, I was, astaghfirullah azim, Allah forgive me for the things that I did before, but I did do some things that I definitely would never do now. I lived a typical young white woman's life, I guess. I had no cares in the world, but about 2011 February or January, I would say, this was the real start into my path in Islam. Before this, I knew about Islam. I had Muslim ex-boyfriend, and a lot of my friends here in Malaysia, being an Islamic country also, I had a lot of Muslim friends, but maybe not so many religious Muslim friends, because religious people wouldn't tend to want to hang out with somebody like me back then. But I always was against religion in a certain sense, mainly because of the human influence on religion. As we know, a lot of the holy books before had been changed or corrupt, and people tend to take religion for their own benefits and change it and, reword it, or just take certain phrases from it to make it how they want people to act in their accordance. So I've always really tried to stay away from religion for this. My parents aren't very religious. I never really had somebody in my life to tell me, believe in God. So I took the path of actually not believing that there ever was a God before. And, I mean, I guess you're content in that way of living when you think it's the right way or you think you're right in this. So I was okay until last year I moved into a new house, and I ended up having a jinn in my house. For those of you who don't know what a jinn is another sort of species that lives on earth with us, and they also live in Allah's will as well. So this jinn started to have an impact on my life in a way. Scared me quite bad on a few occasions, closing doors and whatnot, and moving things around my house.
If I may ask, did you feel some sort of demoniac possession? Is that a more accurate description?
No, luckily it didn't actually affect my human body. Alhamdulillah. I'm so good because I've seen a lot of videos about that kind of thing. I was more a presence in the house itself.
You felt a presence, in other words. You felt some sort of evil presence in your house.
At first I didn't feel it, but I've had this feeling before, like long time ago. I've had experiences with what I would call a ghost back then. But I had felt this feeling. It's like a gripping feeling in your soul, where you think your soul would be like next to your heart, something like this. You feel this gripping feeling. I only felt this actually, it would be about May last year, which was a few months after the first incident happened with the jinn, which was the jinn closed the door a sliding door right in front of my best friend's eyes. But I didn't feel anything after that until about May, when I came home late one night and I'd left the light on outside my door. I went outside to close it, and I felt this feeling again. And I heard like sort of white noise, you know, the noise that the TV makes when there's no channel present. And that's when I really felt it, and I got so scared. My heart fell out of my chest, and I was alone, and I didn't know what to do. I shut the door. I locked my bedroom door. And when I turned around, I heard a very loud bang on the door, and the whole door shook as if it was coming towards me. And in this moment, you know, you're so afraid, and you can't see what's after you, and you don't know how to protect yourself. And out of all the religions that I studied in my life, I looked to Allah. I asked Allah, please, Allah, protect me tonight. If, you know, I don't know what to do, and I'm scared, Allah, protect me. If you're there, listen to me, please protect me. And in this kind of situation, you don't think you're going to sleep. You're so afraid. But subhanAllah, I went to sleep in less than 5 minutes, I think. So this was the real kickstart.
And subsequently, was there any individual that kind of motivated you, that moved you? Your education, you know, I saw your clips where you said that you in fact read a considerable amount of the Quran prior to accepting Islam, and obviously you did that by means of access to translations of various sorts. Did you kind of have an overall holistic understanding of what the faith was all about prior to accepting Islam, or was that process developed after you had come into the faith?
Well, I'm not really one to jump into a situation. I have to be convinced. I'm very, very stubborn, which I guess is a good thing, because now I'm very stubborn in my Islam also. I'm very strict to it. So I did study a lot. Over the next few months after this incident, I did start to ask my ex-boyfriend about it, because he's a good Muslim, and he studies a lot of Quran, and he prays 5 times a day, and he does good for people. He does follow a lot of what Islam guides us to. So subhanAllah, like, I was so lucky to have him with me at this time, because he taught me a lot of the things. At first, I needed to be convinced, so I started to ask, what does Islam teach? He would tell me Islam teaches things such as patience. So I would take situations like traffic jams or whatsoever to try to put this into practice and see if something was going to come out of it. You know, if that was a one-time incident that happened with Allah, or if there is going to be something to continue with. Because after that night, I promised that I would look into whatever this was. So I did start to put things into practice, and subhanAllah, things did happen. Like if I calm myself and I say, Allah teaches patience, be patient, the situation would change. I wouldn't have a need to be impatient anymore. So this was like kind of the convincing stage, I would call it. And then came Ramadan last year. And this is when I really took to like think and really decide, is this what I want to be in? So that's when I decided to read Quran, and I tried fasting for the whole month, and I taught myself to pray. And this is how I kind of, you know, I wanted to know what life as a Muslim is going to be like, whether I can take it, whether I'm going to be strict in it and I'm going to follow it, or am I just going to go back to the same me as before. This is how I really started to like study and learn what's about Islam.
Did you have, I mean, and I don't know you spent a considerable amount of time in Malaysia from the age of 15, and Malaysia is a sort of a multicultural society. You've got a smattering of Hindus, a large proportion of Muslims, but it's not an Islamic state per se. Did you have, obviously, some sort of immediate prior misconceptions or perceptions about the faith, or was your understanding of the faith purely incidental? I mean, you know, in the West now, and of course you're familiar with the recent film that's, you know, posted on YouTube that's come out about the Prophet and all these kind of stereotypes, and you know, that you basically have the influx of terrorism, acts of terror, the perception that Islam is a violent faith. I mean, were these elements that kind of, in a sense, infested your worldview to the extent that you viewed the faith in a negative light, or had these kind of stereotypical conceptions on the position of women, the fact that they're oppressed and all of that?
Well, if you look back to when all of this misconceptions about Islam started in 2001 in the 9/11, I was in Canada at that time, and I watched that unfold in my school. But I did have a Muslim friend at that age. She's Lebanese, and I don't know. I guess I'm not that much of a bigot or a closed-minded person. I don't like to generalize people based on other people's actions. So I don't think this really ever affected me, because after that event, I never looked at Muslims like they're terrorists. And the Muslims that I met in Malaysia, there's not. I mean, most of the ones I met are students, and they're still young, and they're straight out of the Middle East and coming to an open society where they have all this freedom, and maybe they lose their faith a bit, but I didn't really have a perception of Islam, so to say. I was against all religions in general, not any one direct religion.
Mm-hmm. Sister Victoria, you finally overcame the issue of the spirit in the house?
Well, I moved.
You moved? Oh, all right, okay.
Directly after that night, I never slept in the house again.
All right, okay. But that had no role in you accepting Islam at all? Not at all?
Well, that was the first push. And then after that is when I kept to my promise, and I decided that I would start looking into it. So that was the kickstart, and then I ran away from that. But I haven't had a jinn ever since. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, sister, interestingly, Sister Batul Al-Tuma, who is a white Irish, once Catholic convert from the Islamic Foundation in the UK, and now she heads the New Muslim Project, speaks of converts. And I generally don't like to use that term, but lots of people that are New Muslims prefer the term. I don't know why, for any particular reason. I like to call it migration, But in Britain, desperately trying to retain their identity as being British and Muslim rather than expecting them. Now, which has been the trend to adopt the culture of the mentor or person who introduced them to Islam so that they are able to fit in. Now, another scholar, and of course a New Muslim, and Sophie Ronell, says there are 3 stages after conversion. The first one is where the convert immerses themselves in the culture and processes of the context in which they converted. Secondly, when they reach the stage of being completely discouraged with the Muslims around them and start retracting and separating from the cultural element they adopted. And the third one, she says, the return of the cultural identity that they grew up with, but the transformational and religious advantages of being Muslim. Thus, they reconnect with their own culture and identity. Now, did you find that you lost your identity on accepting Islam, or were you able to synthesize who you were culturally and racially with Islam?
I wouldn't say I lost myself. Maybe the self itself changed, because I still feel very Canadian. I'm still very proud to be Canadian. Okay, but also Canada has a very accepting feel to it, because, sorry to say, unlike America, we don't think it's our land. We don't have this, egotistical value over the land that we live on there, because even me, I'm only first-generation Canadian. My parents are both British and Scottish. So I do know, the kind of maybe culture that they're talking about in England, because it is very segregated in England, and there is a lot of racism there. But as for Canada, it's very, very integrated. And, I mean, you don't get these niche groups of different races or religions. Everybody just kind of mixes around with each other and gets in each other's business. So I don't think I really lost myself. I think I just changed who myself was, and that was something that I wanted to do. And I still feel I'm the same person inside as I was a year ago, or a year plus ago now. But yeah, I don't think I really lost myself. I think more I found myself, actually.
Wonderful.
In a sense.
I think, Sister Victoria, and just to extend on that issue, is that sometimes we find, and I don't know, we see it in South Africa, and I've seen it in South Africa, that you find in general, Islam is not a culture. You've got an Albanian Muslim, you've got a Palestinian Muslim, you've got an African Muslim, you've got an Indian Muslim. They've all got different cultures and different norms and different idiosyncrasies. And I think my question rather to you is that a lot of practices amongst Muslims in general, and maybe in Malaysian society they've got their own culture, but a lot of practices happen to be cultural as opposed to something which is inherently religious. And sometimes I see this, and I've seen this in the greater Durban area, where you find we have a large number of Indian Muslims in South Africa, and you find that